From South Carolina Public Radio, this is Walter Edgar's Journal. This week, we will be talking with South Carolina watercolor artist Mary Whyte.
A traditionalist preferring a representational style and the author of 7 published books, Mary has earned awards for her large-scale watercolors.
Today, we'll look back on Mary's career and talk about her new book, An Artist's Life, Unlocking Creative Expression. Mary, it's great to have you back on the Journal. I think this is number 3.
Yes, it is, Walter. It's a great pleasure to be here.
And you have another new book. This particular one, An Artist's Life, you talk about how you became an artist and what is different about your work. And I think the main thing that I would like to stress after reading your book is you said it's not about training. You have to have a passion
Yes.
for what you do. And that just reminded me when I was interviewing young men and women who want to take a study with me for graduate school. I want to get a PhD. Do you have any passion for history? If you just want to get a degree, go work with somebody else. You've got to care about what you do, and then you want to share what you've done. And with your art, you're sharing the stories and the lives of, I would say, the common folk of America.
That's right. And you know, as far as passion for one's work, I do often stress to my students that unless you feel strongly about what it is that you're painting, neither will the viewer. And for my subjects, the people that I paint, people from all across America that I've been painting for decades now, I'm very passionate about that and passionate about presenting them as they are.
Well, it all started with a chartreuse crayon, right?
Oh, you've been reading the book.
Yes, I told you.
He does that a lot.
And I've marked it up, too. So, with a chartreuse crayon.
Yes, that was one of my very first memories of the impact of color. My father brought home a big box of crayons, and I discovered chartreuse. What an amazing color that was. And so this book, Walter, is part autobiographical, but it's also really, I think, guidelines for anyone wishing for more creativity in their life, whether it's an artist, photographer, writer, musician, that because I believe that artists, too many artists, spend their lifetime painting other people's paintings. And I wanted to address that so that authors who are writing other people's stories, poets writing other people's poems, people decorating their homes like someone else would decorate it. The goal of this book was for people to find their own voice to discover what they love and to be able to live their life that way.
Well, you were in grammar school when you got the crayon, and that was color, but then you started sketching.
That's right.
And untaught, you just started sketching?
Well, yes. One of my earliest memories was going to the beauty salon with my mother and sitting on the floor with paper and pencil and drawing their feet because that was there.
Well, and then you were visiting your aunt, and you got your first commissioned work. Well, it wasn't commissioned.
Yes.
You got your first paid.
Yes, I was in the 8th grade. I was visiting a relative in New Jersey, sitting on her front steps, doing a pen and ink of this sort of falling down in restaurant across the street. And she came out, and she looked at it, and she says, "Mary, I'll bet they might buy that to put that on their menu cover or on their cocktail napkins." And so she took it over, and I'm sitting on the step, and she comes back, and she puts $20 in my hand. And I said, "Wow, you mean they pay you to do this? I mean, this is so far better than babysitting." So I guess that would be the day.
Much better than babysitting.
You could say that I turned pro that day.
Hey, that was back in the day of 25 or 50 cents an hour.
That's right.
Yeah. So did that spur you on to go to school as an art training school or just regular college?
Well, I think that all of my life, I couldn't imagine anything else but being an artist. And from early on, I just decided that would be how I live my life. Even if I have to live in a cardboard box on the street, that was what I would do. Now, my father was not all in favor of this. He was a very conservative man, the son of a priest, and so he thought that if I went to art school, I would turn into a hippie, and that would be the worst thing in his mind for me to do. So we had a bit of a tug of war on that one.
But you won?
I did. I was determined. He said, well, if you want to go to art school, you have to pay for it yourself. And at the ripe old age of, almost 18, I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll just move into Cleveland. That was our nearest city. I'll go to the art school there. I'll work nearby probably waiting on tables. So I went down to the housing bureau, and they said, what's your budget? And I said, but budget? and they said, well, how much money do you make? I said, oh, well, I can wait on tables. And so she goes all the way down the end of the list, and she says, well, the last one on the whole list. And I said, I'll take it. So what I didn't know is they called my father that afternoon because I was underage. And what I didn't know was I was about to sign on into what was a nearly abandoned old hotel in Cleveland that was really, the tenants were prostitutes. And so my father came home from work that night and said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll send you anywhere in the world you want to go to art school, as long as you live in safe housing and you get teaching certification. So I thought, deal, score. So that's how it worked.
Okay. So that takes you in your 20s, and then within 10 years, you end up in South Carolina. Now, how did that
That's
happen?
right.
How did that happen?
Well, at that point in my life, I ran into some major medical challenges. And that really, at that point, when you're at that age, you think you're going to live forever and that you're invincible. Well, I quickly discovered that maybe I wouldn't live forever. So I made a decision to move to South Carolina. I had visited here before, and it was just the best thing I ever did in my life. That the people that I met, the people that I started painting, it was a total unexpected career focus and change.
Well, you moved to Charleston, but you did not live in Charleston, where for more than a century people have come to Charleston as artists to live down south of Broad and all of that. You chose to live on Johns Island.
That's right.
In very rural Johns Island.
That's right. And that's where I met the Gullah women of Johns Island. By chance, I met them, and I started painting them. And I kept thinking, this is a story that needs to be told, in an earnest and in an honest way and in an honorable way. So I started painting them. We had a gallery in Charleston at the time, and it was actually the former studio of Elizabeth O'Neill Verner.
Oh, okay.
Who had her etching press in that lower room there, and we actually found behind one of the mantels one of her original etching plates.
Oh, wow. You still have it?
Yes, I do.
And so that was the women on Bohicket Road, or down Bohicket Road.
That's right. That was the genesis of Down Bohicket Road, which was the story of these women.
But you actually did more than just paint them. You met with them literally on a weekly basis, did you not?
Oh, absolutely, yes. They would meet in a little church on Bohicket Road for Bible study, quilt making, big hot meal, to sing, Gullah spirituals. And so they became a really big part of my life.
How did they react, the first one, when you said, I'd like to paint you?
I was well aware that for many of them, they had experienced situations that were not good for them, where they had been taken advantage of, where maybe photographs were taken of them, or prints made of them, or books about them sold.
The curious or picturesque black South Carolinian of the pre-World War II era that
Right.
people like Elizabeth Neal Verner painted.
Yeah.
They're the flower ladies. They're the basket weavers. They're almost an imaginary.
Right. Somewhat stereotypical.
Yeah.
And I was determined not to do that. And so I think the women knew that. They embraced it. And I was also very protective of them. I did not want busloads of tourists coming in now to see them. And I dedicated all the royalties from those books to them, to their senior center. So they were actually quite proud. And so whenever there was a book signing, they would be there, pen in hand, to sign the page where their image was on. And they could recite what page number it was.
That is so cool.
You don't live on Bohicket Road now. Do you go back?
Yes, I was back quite recently. Went back to Seabrook Island after a number of years and met with old neighbors and friends. I spoke with the grandson of Alfreda just yesterday on the phone. Alfreda was the woman that probably painted the most, who would introduce me as her vanilla sister. And now she's passed on, but I've painted her great granddaughters, the twins, very recently.
Okay. Well, there's one painting in here that grabbed me, and I don't know whether this is its origin. It's the fireman. Did you paint that after that horrible fire at the mattress factory there in Charleston?
Oh, gosh. It could have been after so many different fires. And that one certainly people would relate to it from their locale. The one that I think you're referring to, that particular fireman was from Oregon and was actually one of the many veterans that I painted for that series.
Well, I wasn't sure, but it's a very moving piece. It's almost like my buddies didn't make it. That's why, to me, I related to that horrible fire in Charleston.
Yes, in this scene, for your listeners that may not be familiar with that painting, it's a young firefighter. He's standing in full gear. He's got smoke smudged on his face. His hair is sweaty, and he's casting his gaze down. And behind him, I painted what looks like a burnt-out forest area, still smoking just a little bit, because I thought I could paint him heroically, sort of going off to fight the fire. But it occurred to me that when there's a fire, even when it's put out, something's always lost. And I wanted to show that fatigue, the weight of his job on him in that painting.
Okay. The veterans, and that was an interesting series that you did. I can remember I first heard about it from Martha.
Martha Severance?
Yes, Martha Severance, Alfred. You have a good memory.
Well, they pay me for it.
Oh, dear.
No, Martha Severance for a long time at the Greenville Museum of Art, correct?
Yes, she was curator there, and she has written several books.
Yes, and for the encyclopedia, she was the art editor.
Longtime friend of Walter Edgar's journal.
Yes. And so what made you decide to do the Veterans series? And right off the bat, folks, this is not everybody in their uniform with all their medals.
No.
This is about men and women in their everyday lives.
Yeah, I wanted to do a portrait of all of America, showing the diversity of our people. And so I got this idea that I really feel our truest patriots, our truest Americans are our veterans, because they are the ones that raise their hand to serve our country and to make potentially great sacrifices for our country. So this is a project that took me 7 years to do. I traveled to all 50 states in secret. Almost no one knew I was working on this project. And I painted everything from an astronaut all the way down to a homeless man, and in between a dairy farmer, a tattoo artist, a teacher, a coal miner, so that all these 50 paintings together would be a real portrait of America. And this is an exhibition that opened in 2019. It's still touring. And in May, it will be opening in Milwaukee at the Groman Museum. As part of, celebrating America 250 this year. And at the same time, another exhibition of mine called Salt of the Earth will be opening at the Gibbs Museum of Art here in Charleston, and another 26 paintings.
Okay.
A technical question now from someone who knows very little about your process. When you're traveling to 50 states, to find 50 individuals you're going to paint. Do you photograph them in detail and bring those back to your studio, or what do you work on site? What do you do?
Well, ideally, if I could get these people to freeze in action, that would be perfect. But not many people can do that. So I do also rely on photographs, but I also rely a great deal on memory. Things that I remember seeing at the time or hearing, things that might be added into the narrative of the painting. And then, of course, probably any artist's the biggest asset would be imagination. That what could be, what might be, what might I add in or take out that could add to the emotional push of this painting.
Okay. You're going to Texas and you're going to do a veteran. Huge state. How do you select the veteran that you're going to paint?
Well, I made a list of all the kinds of veterans that I wanted to do, and some of them I just sort of found along the way. I was in Houston, and I thought, okay, I'll see if I can find a veteran here. And somehow I made my way over to it was a religious ministries service that housed homeless veterans. And I found a young woman who came to this country with her 2 sons to give them a better life. And she enrolled in the military. And when she left, she did not receive her paycheck from the military. And so because of this delay in her payment, she and her sons were now homeless. And so she was staying in this crisis center. She looks out the window and she could see some apartments being built. And she said, I learned how to do that in the military. I can construct. I can build a building. So she walked over, got a job on site that day. And so that's how I portrayed her in the painting. But other veterans I found like making phone calls, like to the National Dairymen's Association. Do you have a veteran who's? Do you have a dairyman who's a veteran, or stopping at truck stops and knocking on the cabs? Hey, are you a veteran? So it was a lot of trial and error and traveling around the country, making phone calls. A lot of them were not answered back. Again, I think people were suspicious of who this artist might be, saying that she's going to do something that they didn't really understand.
Well, I was going to say, people might say it's easy to find a veteran. Well, the number of veterans, my generation, Vietnam veterans, literally hundreds are dying every day.
That's right.
And not that many men and women are in the armed forces anymore. Not what they used to be. So finding a veteran was not easy.
That's true. For instance, you would think finding a window washer would be easy. But finding one who's a veteran, that was probably a good 20 phone calls before I could find that.
So you wanted a veteran who was a window washer?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because, again, that is a part of America. And so I wanted any veteran that walks into this exhibition to see themselves, but I also want any American to walk in and say, yeah, that's kind of me in that painting.
Okay. Wow. And that exhibit initially opened in Greenville, did it?
No, it actually opened in Charleston.
In Charleston at the
Yes.
Gibbs. Okay.
At the City Gallery in Charleston, yeah, because the Gibbs wasn't quite big enough to house 50 paintings. It's a lot of space.
Oh, okay. And do you control how they're displayed, or that's really up to the museum where they?
That's up to the museum.
Okay.
We just get the paintings there, and they're so professional and qualified. They know how to handle them, how to hang them, how to crate them again.
Have you ever been there when some of the veterans showed up?
Yes, and so moving. And that's really what prompted me to start the Patriot Art Foundation, which is our mission is to give veterans a means of expression and connection through art. And what we do is we teach veterans how to paint at their kitchen tables, which is as a way to relieve stress, lessen depression, lessen PTSD, give them a sense of accomplishment and enjoyment. And then we have these online opportunities where they can connect via Zoom. And we also go into VAs. We're in VAs from Alaska to Florida, where we can bring in art supplies and just teach them how to paint. And it can be a great sense of pleasure for them. I certainly know myself as an artist the great pleasure that creating the act of painting or drawing can bring.
So you've got colleagues in the profession around the country who are participating in this program.
That's right. We have artists that are teaching veterans how to draw, teaching veterans how to paint. And so we've got a terrific board working on this as well.
Wow. Golly, that really takes my breath away, Mary. It's fabulous. But what better way to honor our country's 250th than with not only portraying the veterans, but then giving them, or rather encouraging their talents or finding a talent to paint. I mean, that's just... Alfred, you have to take over because this is just...
as the husband of an Air Force veteran,
wow,
who loves to paint and draw and has only had a few classes and is often saying to herself, "Is this any good?" Mm-hmm. You're right. This encourages me. I'm going to report this to her. She's going to want to hear what you have to say, and
Well, Alfred, you could send her to our website.
Cool. What is that?
And that is the patriotartfoundation.org. And your listeners, if there are veterans that might be interested in learning how to draw or learning how to paint, or we have, if you'd like to be involved and help us financially, we would love to have your assistance.
All right. You're never without a project.
That's right.
What's next?
Well, of course, this next coming exhibition here in Charleston, The Salt of the Earth, that goes up in May in conjunction with Spoleto.
All right, Salt of the Earth.
Yes, Salt of the Earth.
All right, you're still dealing with every man, every woman.
Yes. I that's always what's interested me the most. I think it's, that we have so many people of accomplishment in this country, people, the CEOs and senators and mayors. But I think it'd be much more interesting to paint the person who cleans their office.
So you've got The Salt of the Earth in Charleston, but I know you've got another book somewhere.
Oh, well, I think so. This one, An Artist's Life, just came out and is doing quite well. Of course, there will be another book. There'll be more paintings. And, people often ask me, so Mary, what's your next painting? And I often say, I don't know, but I'm really excited about it. So I don't always know. I think in many ways, as artists, our paintings find us. And we know that that's what we should be painting by the emotional response we get from that idea.
Well, in reading your book, An Artist's Life, besides the idea of passion, something really struck a chord, and that is somebody say, "Oh, you're talented," and it's so easy to do it. And the reason it struck a chord is back when I was still teaching at the university, I had a department chair who said, "Well, you've got your second book in 3 years. It just comes easy for you." Mm-hmm. And I said, "No, it doesn't, because I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I write before I come in and teach my classes. I review it, and it's, sometimes a chapter would be revised 30 times. Writing is work."
That's right. And I tell the students it comes down to three things. It comes down to having something to say, and a lot of artists have trouble with that. What do I want to say as an artist? What do I want to paint? And then it's having the means to do so, and that's, in other words, the background of knowing how to mix color, how to soften an edge. For a writer, how to construct a story, a beginning, a middle, and end. And then last of all, and this is the biggest hurdle for my students, and I think for anybody in any creative force, is the courage to do so. It's getting past the fear of, what if nobody likes it? What if I mess it up? What if I can't finish it? What if it doesn't sell? What if it doesn't get into the show? All these fears that anybody has, a musician, a writer, a poet, a photographer, all these, self-doubts keep coming in.
But if you care about what you're doing and you have passion, then plow ahead.
Then it's never work.
It's never work, but you have to work at it.
Well, I'll tell my students, that are really struggling and they really want to perfect their craft and make it as an artist. And I say, okay, there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is it never gets any easier. The good news is, but it does get a whole lot more satisfying.
Yeah. The title for your second book, how that came about, having dealt with publishers and editors and what have you, you're dealing with the director of the USC Press, and you're batting things around, and staff always has their suggestions as to what they think you're meaning to say. And then all of a sudden, he said, and I know who the director was at the time, he said, "What is it about?" And you said, "More than a likeness."
Right. For your listeners, you would think that the title of the book comes first. That's actually the last thing that happens, because that brings in all marketing, salespeople, like what is going to stand out, what's not been used before, and so they're batting around all these titles, and finally they just say, "Okay, Mary, just what do you want people to know that this book is about?"
And that's true for history books too. They want something on the cover that's going to attract notice, and the title has got to be a grabber.
That's right.
Well, and as a layman, just having seen her books over the years and hearing a title like More Than a Likeness, I'd say that is so apropos, because it's if you see one of Mary's paintings, it's not just a likeness. A photographer could do a likeness. An amateur photographer could do a likeness. There's obviously so much more into it. I mean, she was talking a moment ago about coming back with photographs, but also what feels right for this person? What says something about this person? What brings the situation to the viewer's eye? And what a great title. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this book, by the way, am I correct in saying it goes back through all the years you've been working in, and it's a sort of a look back across time?
Yes, it is. But it's constructed in a way that I want to be helpful to the reader, for people searching for their own means of expression. Because I think that I always said that too many artists paint other people's paintings, and I want this to be kind of a guide and an inspiration for them to go back to be reminded of that.
Mary Whyte, An Artist's Life. We didn't talk about the subtitle, which is what all publishers love to have. It's called Unlocking Creative Expression.
And that subtitle, that took weeks to get that subtitle right.
Of course it did.
Hey. Well, Mary, I want to thank you for first of all, making the trip from Charleston. It's so much better to have a guest in the studio than online. Thank you for making the effort, but also as a veteran, I really was moved by what you have done and are doing. Thank you.
Well, thank you that you are a veteran, and to all the veterans in this country. We owe our deepest thanks to them.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Mary Whyte. I know that I did. During her 50 years as an artist and teacher, Mary Whyte has discovered that tapping our personal well of creativity and passion is central to an artist's work, much more so than mastering how to paint an eye, clouds, or stream. And her new book, An Artist's Life, Unlocking Creative Expression, provides the viewer with many beautiful and moving examples of her passion and creativity.
Walter Edgar's Journal is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. I'm Alfred Turner, and I produce the show, which is made possible by listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. Remember, the views and opinions expressed on Walter Edgar's Journal are not necessarily those of South Carolina Public Radio or its underwriters.
Many of the books discussed on Walter Edgar's Journal can be found as part of the Walter Edgar's Journal Book Nook section at all good books in Columbia, South Carolina, or may be available from your local bookstore. We'll talk again soon.